The latest Honor device is finally released globally and it's gorgeous. For about $250, a 48 megapixel camera, outstanding CPU performance, 6 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. Is there a catch? Let's get started. Hey, welcome everyone, Tech for All channel. I'm Michael and I'm so passionate about cool tech. This phone is quite fresh for most countries, although it's been rolled out in China a few months ago. The Honor 9X Pro, which comes with fantastic specs, the even more fantastic X mark on the back, however brings the usual for 2020 lack of Google services in Google Play Store on Huawei-related brands, which includes Honor. In this video, I won't be able to show you how to fix that. Check the description for more info, but we're going to focus instead on alternatives, which turn out to be good enough, and due to the lack of the huge Google framework, this phone offers fantastic battery endurance. Hardware and software information are coming after we check on the pricing. It clearly is a mid-ranger, that's the successor to the very popular 9X, and the Pro brings better camera compartment and slightly improved hardware. And based on the benchmarks, it surpasses almost every popular mid-ranger, and the Honor 9X Pro stands right below the top-end devices with Snapdragon 855, which means most of last year's flagships. I think if you purely look into the combo of what this phone offers, the large battery, the 48 megapixel camera, the sleek and beautiful design, the lack of notch and even a headphone jack which is present, it is hard to find a better deal. And while on the software end we need to have a serious discussion, the hardware is fabulous. Let's get started with the unboxing, and hereby I need to announce that the phone has been sent to me by Honor for testing and I have the freedom to say anything I like, which is my usual demand in case someone asks me to test the device. Standard package. You won't see any deviation to the traditional boxes of other brands and models. Inside the phone, the Type-C cable and the charger. So far so good, in fact really nice to see an original silicone case and pre-applied screen protector. To me, these two are hard prerequisites before I get to use any phone because of the dynamics that life is usually offering. I say usually because these days staying at home is my standard condition. Let's start exploring the phone with the display. 6.59 inches, 1080p, 19.5 by 9 aspect ratio. LCD technology and peak brightness is just above 500 nits, which a couple of years ago was considered to be quite a lot. The coverage is tempered glass, non-scratchable, however it is not any of the Gorilla Glass editions. Turning the phone around, and here's another layer of glass, the backside. I have to admit that while I'm quite against glass phones, this idea of integrating the X on the back and making it so glossy and beautiful feels good. Such a pity that I always carry the phone with a case, because it loses a big part of the glamour. Anyhow, battery life with phenomenal endurance, at least for a mid-ranger. 4000 mAh capacity sounds like a lot, and it delivers big time. Even with a lot of apps installed, you won't feel betrayed from the battery life. With normal usage, getting 2 days is quite easy to achieve. I was usually getting screen on time above 4 or 5 hours together with that in an area with rather poor network coverage. The cameras combo are an interesting piece, and you saw them while exploring that fancy glass back. 48 megapixel main shooter. Looks like Huawei are finally ready to bring their P-series knowledge into the more affordable product lines, and that tends to work really well with a few software limitations though. Photos are good. I like what Honor have fine-tuned in terms of color science, and you won't get overexposure or oversaturation, which some brands implement. Good sharpness, good contrast and saturation. Noise reduction is a bit too aggressive, and you will notice lack of detail in some of the objects. But there's this nice mode called 48 megapixel AI Ultra Clarity, which is quite helpful in these situations. However, you need to patiently hold the phone still while taking the photo, because the camera takes a few photos, the software analyzes them and puts them together in order to give you detailed and perfectly exposed photo, and all that takes a few seconds. You can of course use the non-AI 48 megapixel mode as well as the regular lower res modes. To my surprise, this camera seems to be slightly better than the OnePlus 7, a 2019 flagship, but falls behind the Mi 10 Pro camera, which right now tops the DxOMark charts. And at least you now know what is the gap between the best camera as of March 2020 and this one. Keep in mind that the brighter it gets outdoors when shooting, the smaller this gap actually is. I'm overall very positively surprised by the Honor 9X Pro's camera performance, and the photos are with top-class quality. But there doesn't seem to be an enabled RAW format for the most enthusiastic photographers. The front selfie camera is a pop-up cam and everyone complains that it's kind of slow. Well, maybe it is. I wish there was so good autofocus and face tracking on the Panasonic GH5, which costs about 5 times more than this phone. As for video, electronic image stabilization in 1080p, and the bitrate is enough to give you really good movies. I was expecting to see 4K support, but somehow Honor preferred to keep it for the higher-end devices. Truth is that it's the processor inside that can decode only up to 1080p at 60 frames per second, one of the very few areas where a Snapdragon is a kind of better. Speaking of the CPU and performance, one of the first phones to offer the Kirin 810 and one of the best performing in its class, scores more than P20 Pro, the Mi Note 10, the Galaxy S9, and is actually very close to last year's Samsung flagships, which is totally crazy in the good way. A conclusion to be made after this week of spent with the Honor 9X Pro, the good mid-rangers, based on Kirin, are way better performing than the mid-rangers with Snapdragon. This one is cooler, consumes less battery, is almost impossible to get throttling, and it's quite fine for gaming too. To finish the most important hardware specs, 6 gigs of RAM for the global version, by the way the Chinese model has 8, 256 gigs of storage, which is phenomenal. Speaker, well, this could have been better, not good for music playback. As for purely phone quality, the 9X Pro does well, excellent clarity, and looks like the microphones are good too. And if we mention the FM radio and the headphone jack, I guess the 9X Pro makes it up for not being too loud. Next, we talk about software. This is my first non-Play Store smartphone. I never realized so far how dependent we have gotten on Google. And it's not just the maps or the Play Store itself, they have good alternatives, but no Gmail, the inability to use any kind of service that requires the Play Store authorization or authentication, like restoring your game progress from Play Games or the Google Pay services. If so far none of these rings a bell, that's good, because the less Google apps you use, the more suitable the 9X Pro will be for you. In fact, the Play Store collects a lot of behavioral data for each one of us, and thanks to the hundreds of services and processes, consumes a lot of battery. The first thing you should do is to get an alternative of Play Store. Huawei's App Gallery is preloaded for you and intensively increases its content with the hope to soon be good enough. But it is obvious that it still lacks the precise categorization and the security precautions and filters of Play Store. I really like APK Pure because it is a website with traditions and rather good history. In fact, it's a reasonable alternative to Play Store, and you might even get some apps that Google have banned from their market. Secondly, as a person that doesn't like MUI launchers, here's the Nova launcher, which has its free version and has dedicated app drawer. You're gonna find alternatives for almost everything. Bunch of good email clients, 9 is my absolute favorite, Maps Me, with maps and navigation that is often more precise than Google Maps, and you can get Google Chrome, which also works fine. Actually, it works suspiciously quicker than on a phone with Google services installed. There are alternative apps for pretty much anything you like and use, even for YouTube. Honor smartphones are usually giving a freedom for a lot of customizations, and the MUI running here is no exception. Themes engine, button mapper, display calibration, sounds, everything you need and want can be customized. The backup services are also quite good, so is the battery management, with the option to enter ultra battery saving mode. It only lets you access a few apps and gives you 5 times more than the usual battery backup. I need to say that for a mid-ranger, the 9X Pro is buttery smooth, no frame skipping, apps are loading quickly, scrolling through pages is good, gaming is also at a nice level. In terms of performance, the phone is fantastic. Headphone jack for enjoying your favorite music, FM radio, if someone uses this at all. The only thing you may truly miss, especially if you use Google Drive and Google services a lot, is the G-Apps package. But if that wouldn't matter, then the 9X Pro is fantastic for its performance, camera and features, and having less services gives you greater battery life. In short, perhaps the best-in-class hardware and a few questions you need to ask yourself about the software before getting it. That's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for checking out this video. If it was helpful, then please subscribe to the channel and give me a like. Comment below which is the Google app you will miss the most, and let's share our favorite alternatives. Well, time to wish you a wonderful day. I'm Michael and can't wait to see you in the next episode. Bye!